Do you ever witness a brand trying to take a new direction and think to yourself, what the hell is going on? In the automotive industry lately, there have been some pretty loud moves. Of course, Jaguar comes to mind, Audi for sure. BMW's been more slow, but noticeable, certainly. I think one manufacturer has made a shift that's been more under the radar, in part because they've always been under the radar. And of course, I'm talking about Lotus. Lotus is really one of those manufacturers that you look at and wonder how the heck they've survived this long. Truly niche brands in the automotive industry, they just come and go. But here's the thing, the special sauce over at Lotus, the thing that made Lotus Lotus, is something almost intangible and pure and rare in the automotive industry. And for those who really care about a kind of old school purity in their driving experience, nobody, and I mean nobody, has done it like Lotus. So what happened to this great storied brand? How did they lose their soul? Let's find out. Now, before we get too far into this story, I want to tell you about the sponsor for today's video, which is Upside. Now, the holidays are great, but let's be honest, between road trips, family visits, you just end up with endless fuel stops, and they can be brutal on your wallet. That's why I've been using the free Upside app, which gives you real cash back on everyday essentials like gas, groceries, and dining. And my favorite part is it's not a point system, there's no gimmicks, it's just actual money back. So before I fill up, I check Upside, claim an offer, pay as usual, make sure to go through the steps and upload your receipt, and a couple of days later that extra cash hits my account. It's become part of my road trip routine. There are over 100,000 gas stations, grocery stores, and restaurants on Upside, so chances are wherever you drive, you'll find an offer nearby. Upside's given back over $1 billion to its users already, and I use it all the time. You should too. Download the free Upside app and use promo code BART to get an extra 25 cents back per gallon on your first tank of gas. Big thanks to Upside, and let's dive back in. Colin Chapman founded Lotus really in the aftermath of World War II after studying structural engineering at University College London. During his time in school, he and his friend Colin Dare traded second-hand cars, but when fuel rationing returned in 1947, Chapman found himself stuck with really unsellable inventory. The last of these cars, a fabric-bodied Austin 7, really became the foundation for his first engineering experiment. He took the car apart and rebuilt it with plywood as the body. Now this might sound a bit ridiculous, and it was, but Chapman was unknowingly setting the stage for the design principles that would later define and make Lotus great. Chapman's early innovations were also taken from aircraft construction. He continued to study automotive stress and structure at the Institute of Mechanical Engineers Library. He really had a knack for taking abstract principles and putting them into real practical design. His early cars incorporated lightweight space-frame chassis and aerodynamic bodywork, pretty innovative stuff for this time. Eventually, he started Lotus Engineering in the early 1950s. This venture would be the beginning of Chapman's relentless focus on reducing weight in automotive design and also maximizing efficiency. One could characterize it as performance through simplicity. In the early days of Lotus, Colin Chapman's company quickly became known for its lightweight engineering and really clever design ideas. The Lotus 11 was hugely successful in international sports car racing, securing class victories at Le Mans in 1956 and also 57, and hundreds of wins in club events worldwide. Around this time, Graham Hill started working for Chapman at the small Lotus workshop in Hornsey, North London. Chapman ran things in a really unique way. He supplied the parts and know-how while drivers built and raced the cars themselves, and in return, Lotus kept ownership of the car and took a share of any prize money. By 58, Lotus released the Type 16. It was one of the most advanced front-engine Grand Prix cars of its day, with sleek body designed by Frank Costin and a lightweight space-frame chassis. Still, it was pretty complicated and unreliable, especially compared to the newer mid-engine Coupers that were beginning to dominate Formula One. The following year's Type 17 showed Chapman's next step forward, smaller, lighter, and more aerodynamic. It did have some suspension problems, but it really captured his core idea to build cars that are as light and as efficient as possible. Now, Lotus's racing ventures as a company are as important as anything else, really, but it's on the production side where those with a love of pure driving found Lotus to offer something truly unique, even in comparison to what BMW and Porsche had to offer. Few car makers have clung to a single, simple guiding principle as stubbornly or as brilliantly as Lotus. Ever since Colin Chapman's mantra of simplify then add lightness became a kind of engineering scripture, each generation of Lotus road cars has really been an attempt to perfect that. The Elan remains one of the most important production cars in the company's history, a model that took the lightweight British sports car formula and took it to another level, really. The original Elans, the Type 26 and Type 36 and 45, they were built through the 60s and early 70s, and they reflected Colin Chapman's obsession with lightness and innovative construction. The original Elans paired a steel backbone chassis with hand-laid GRP bodies, giving the car lightness but also rigidity. Lotus would continue creating new methods for perfecting rigidity and lightness with the Elan Plus 2S and the Elan S4 Coupe, giving these small, elegant sports cars a remarkably rigid yet featherweight structure. These cars were nothing like anything that was available. The Elan combined this technical sophistication with balanced proportions, resulting in one of the most communicative road cars of its era and maybe ever. Its steering precision and effortless agility really set a benchmark that sports cars would chase for decades. I mean, there is no Mazda Miata, for example, without the Elan. The Elan really represented Chapman's guiding philosophy in its purest form: performance through minimal mass and maximum feel. Now, fast forward to 1995 and the launch of the Elise. This car was really a rebirth of the brand. After quite a few years of uncertainty, the small mid-engined roadster proved that Lotus could still innovate. Named after Romano Artioli's granddaughter Elisa, the Elise embodied a kind of minimalism that had all but disappeared from modern performance cars. The most radical feature was invisible to most onlookers: a bonded aluminum chassis designed by Richard Rockham, which replaced the heavy steel structures of traditional sports cars. This chassis weighed barely 150 pounds, yet it offered incredible rigidity, and this would really be the basis of every Lotus sports car going forward. The original Series 1 Elise used Rover's K-Series engines, which were pretty modest in output, but potent when you think about the fact that the car weighed like 1,600 pounds. And so the result was pretty magical. Steering that just felt alive. This was an incredible sports car. As the Elise evolved through the Series 2 and Series 3, the car gained Toyota engines for better reliability and also global appeal. Even as emissions and regulations, airbags, global safety standards crept in, the Elise remained so elemental, arguably the last truly analog sports car of its kind. Now, if the Elise represented purity, the Exige was kind of like an alter ego, really born for the track. Debuting in 2000, this car really began as a fixed-roof coupe version of the Elise, originally powered by a tuned Rover K engine. It was built for homologation, but it quickly found a cult following among drivers who wanted that Elise feel, but with more supercar aggression. Now, this car would evolve a lot, and it would also really mirror Lotus's roller coaster of, a corporate history. By the time the Exige Cup 380 and Cup 430 came, this car had evolved into almost like a supercar rival. The later cars used a 3.5-liter Toyota-sourced V6, supercharged and charge-cooled, producing up to 430 brake horsepower, which is pretty absurd for a car that weighed about the same as a small hatchback. Yet despite its power, the Exige remained utterly focused on feedback. Inside the cabin was a stripped-out cell of exposed aluminum and minimal padding. Everything served function. This was a no-compromise track car. This car would really be Lotus's first serious attempt in decades to combine its racing-bred dynamics with genuine comfort, and it did pretty well. It was unveiled in 2008 and marked really a major turning point for Lotus. This was the first all-new Lotus in over a decade, and the first with genuine 2+2 seating. Designed by Russell Carr and engineered by Richard Rockham, it was intended to reintroduce Lotus to buyers who might otherwise consider something like a Cayman or 911. Built on an evolved version of the Elise's bonded aluminum chassis, the Evora was much more sophisticated, but it didn't lose any of that lightness. Power came from a 3.5-liter Toyota V6, making 276 horsepower, but later, supercharged versions were making well over 400 horsepower. It was the most comfortable and refined Lotus cabin ever. It had things like real leather, aluminum switchgear. It was more ergonomic as well. But despite all of this, it never abandoned Lotus's defining characteristics. Despite also moving up market, Lotus was managing to make different and more modern cars that were still giving you that communication from the road. that was just unmatched from any other vehicle. But this was a car that, was at least somewhat capable of long-distance touring, but you could still take it out on windy roads and it felt pretty much as alive as if you were driving in a lease. In essence, the Evora proved that Lotus could mature and evolve without, losing what made them great. Now, by the time the Emira arrived in 2021, the automotive world had changed really beyond recognition. Hybrids and electric vehicles were redefining performance, and Lotus itself was now owned by China's Geely Group. But with the Emira, Lotus chose to give a kind of farewell to everything that had made them great. This car was meant to replace the Evora, and it represented a synthesis of everything Lotus had learned over really 70 years. It retained the mid-engine layout, came in 2 powertrains, a supercharged Toyota V6 and a turbocharged AMG 4-cylinder, all of this wrapped in a body that just looked mini supercar-esque. Also, the Emira improved on Lotus's long-criticized shortcomings, things like build quality, ergonomics, and comfort, and just everyday usability. But the essence of what made it a Lotus was still there. The steering was still hydraulic and communicative, the chassis still balanced, and that classic Lotus driver-focused experience, it was all still there. But sadly, it was presented not just as a new car, but as a goodbye to all those great cars. Across the decades, from the original Elan in '62 to the Elise to the final Emira, Lotus refined the idea of a pure sports car. Each model really represented an evolution in philosophy, but never a departure from that philosophy. So what the heck happened? Why did this beloved, if also perpetually struggling brand, decide to shift entirely away from its roots and start building heavy, expensive electric vehicles? Very few legacy automakers have switched to going all in on electrification, and in Lotus's case, it feels especially strange. Electric cars, and especially premium high-tech ones, they're almost the antithesis of what Lotus was about. Driver feel, mechanical connection, raw, lightweight sports car experience. It's like a smaller scale version of Porsche, and imagine Porsche suddenly abandoning everything it's known for to focus solely on, let's say, electric hypercars and SUVs. Whatever Lotus becomes in the future, the company's plan seems to be for that future to look almost unrecognizable from what it used to be. But this didn't all happen overnight. It's the result of decades of financial instability, repeated ownership changes, and also an eventual shift in philosophy from really focusing on engineering to, focusing on branding. After the 2008 financial crisis, Lotus was in trouble. The Elise and Exige had barely kept the lights on for over a decade. Sales were low. Profitability was almost non-existent. The company went through multiple ownership structures, first under Proton, the Malaysian automaker, then briefly through DRB, Highcom, and finally to Geely, which acquired a controlling stake in 2017. Though the goal was to fix things, each time there was a shift in ownership, it really diluted the independence that defined Lotus's engineering culture. When Geely stepped in, the first priority was to try to make Lotus a viable global brand, something that honestly I don't think Lotus was ever meant to be. Geely hoped to scale Lotus. That meant broadening appeal beyond these small, low-volume sports cars, and to do that, they began building an entirely new business model around electrification, luxury, and technology. And so within a few years, Lotus announced new platforms. The Evija, an all-electric 2,000 horsepower hypercar with a price tag of around $2.3 million, built mostly to show technical capability and attract attention rather than, sell in any sort of volume. The Eletre, I think that's how you say it. This is a large, fully electric SUV built in Wuhan, China, sharing components with other Geely brands like Volvo and Polestar. The Emea, a 4-door electric Grand Tourer built on the same platform as the Eletre, so I guess technically that's not a separate platform. Now, you don't have to know much about these kinds of vehicles to know how far Lotus has moved from its roots. I mean, this is the company that built a 1,600-pound track car with no power steering, and here they are making a 6,000-pound electric crossover with dual motors, adaptive air suspension, and touchscreen dashboards. I mean, in many ways, the biggest complaint with Lotus over the years has been them not giving their cars any sort of creature comforts and just not caring about that stuff, and now they're going to try to pave the way for the future of those kinds of things and those kinds of tech. I don't know. The new factory in Wuhan is set to be capable of producing up to 150,000 vehicles a year, a scale that is just unimaginable even today for Lotus. I mean, this is a company that many years struggled to build more than 1,000 vehicles in a year. Production of traditional sports cars has ended. The Elise, Exige, and Evora, the cars that really made modern Lotus, they were all discontinued, ending 25 years of continuous production built around these lightweight bonded aluminum cars. And the Emira, when it was introduced, was explicitly marketed as the last gasoline Lotus. Now, some of the things that made the Emira good have come from the fact that they're owned by Geely, but it was still promoted and presented as almost like this, oh, you gotta get it because it's the last of this kind. Which just doesn't make me want one, Lotus's identity was once inseparable from its engineering team. People like Richard Rockham, Julian Thompson, and Roger Becker, they designed these cars almost like artists. That culture has been replaced by a corporate structure centered in Wuhan and also in Coventry, managed through Lotus Technology, a separate entity created by Geely to develop EVs and these software-defined vehicles. The Hethel plant does remain, but it functions mostly as a niche assembly site for low-volume and halo models. Design and development priorities have changed so much. The lightweight minimalist interiors that once defined Lotus have been replaced by giant touchscreens, multi-speaker sound systems, and just powered everything. The Elettra and Emea both weigh around 5,500 pounds, and sure, they make 900 horsepower, but who cares? Everybody's doing that. These vehicles directly contradict the company's historical ethos of adding lightness. Even Lotus's approach to aerodynamics has shifted from functional simplicity to active systems and also styling-led design. But, financially, I guess I get it. They're taking a gamble and they're hoping that this bet will pay off, but it just hurts to see a great brand like Lotus completely lose its identity for the sake of potential profits. Lotus sold fewer than 2,000 cars worldwide in 2019, and now they have ambitions of 150,000 globally by the end of the decade. But even if they do achieve that scale, Lotus has fundamentally changed what kind of company it is. And I just feel like it was never meant to be an EV brand, competing with Tesla and Lucid. Maybe Lotus can scale to these new heights and lead the charge with these premium EVs, but for regular people like you and me, Lotus sports cars, they were meant to be kind of like affordable grails. I mean, do any of us really give a crap about seeing another giant, ugly electric SUV on the road? I couldn't care less, but I still get excited when I see an Elise out there. These cars had aura because you knew they were built out of passion and built in the spirit and inspiration of a true genius and a true enthusiast in Colin Chapman. I wonder if there isn't another path for Lotus. I mean, we've seen the demand for the Emira, which definitely has had its hiccups, but man, people want that car. I want that car. It's one of the only modern production vehicles that I want, honestly. And the sales numbers have been solid, quite a bit better than their previous sports cars. And that's precisely because it's a more usable, comfortable vehicle than their previous sports cars. And it is pricey. I don't know. I just wonder why they can't keep these two divisions of Lotus. Sure, make the hyper EVs and SUVs, whatever. Nobody really cares that Porsche makes those kinds of vehicles as well, or makes SUVs, as long as they keep evolving and upping their game in terms of making true sports cars. For Lotus, why not keep these cars? They had a niche. They had something unique. I remember when the Emira was announced, the hype was real for this vehicle, but it carried with it that shadow of the reality that this would be the last true Lotus, and it's just sad to me. Now, I would love to hear your thoughts. Let us know what you think. I'd love to hear from you guys. Let us know in the comments below. We'll see you in the next one. Drive safe.